What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. Welcome to our daily show where we discuss everything going on here in our country that you need to know about here on a daily basis, including money, investing, the stock market, which has been on an absolute terrible roller coaster. It had the absolute worst week in over 2 years since 2020, since early 2020 here last week. And yeah, it's crazy. And the White House is considering, let me show you here, both gas rebate cards, which is really just another name for stimulus checks, and pausing the federal gas tax. Yeah, we'll be talking about both of those things here in this video. You can see this here directly from Fox News, Fox Business. White House considering sending gas rebate cards to Americans. Right before the weekend, this story came out here. Biden administration emphasizing it's willing to consider any and all solutions to the ongoing inflation crisis. Yeah, and really, if inflation weren't crazy right now, and if people weren't trying to blame the stimulus checks, or at least some people weren't blaming or trying to blame the inflation on the stimulus checks, they would have already sent out another stimulus check here. And if you watch my channel, you know that that's really not the case because inflation is all over the world, at 30 or 40-year highs all over the world. In fact, the UK, one of our closest allies, actually has higher inflation than us. They have 9% inflation. Gas prices are actually much higher than the $5 average here in the US. Most of Europe has $8 and $9 per gallon gas. That's if you equate it to US dollars and US gallons. So that's like 75% more than what we're paying here. So it's not just the US. It's pretty much everywhere. So that goes to show you it's not really like the stimulus checks that the US passed or the stimulus packages. If anything, that prevented us from having a Great Depression 1929 style that we had, and prevented our economy from collapsing and prevented even more businesses from going out of business, and prevented even more people from losing their homes, and prevented even more people from starving, and just prevented the pandemic from being even worse. And the government knows this, and this is why both Republicans and Democrats came together to pass three stimulus checks, two of them underneath Trump, one underneath Biden, and including unemployment bonuses because millions of people lost their jobs because of the pandemic, which is really nobody's fault, and to help save millions of businesses, which is people's jobs. I mean, the other option would be just let all these businesses go out of business and then our economy craters. I mean, which would be worse? Just let our economy fail or help the economy out and the people out in our time of need? And even countries all around the world that didn't pass major stimulus like this are still dealing with major inflation and high gas prices all around the world because it's just part of the normal recessionary cycle. So you're seeing this all around the world right now because we're in a global economy and the whole world's pretty much dealing with the same thing right now. Yeah, so this is, if anything, we prevented our economy from crashing harder than it did. Yeah, so you can see here, White House considering sending gas rebate cards to Americans. And this would basically be a stimulus check, whether they put it on a debit card or they direct deposit it in your bank account. Remember that former President Donald Trump, sent out two stimulus checks. Biden's only sent out one. Okay, so technically Biden sent out less than Trump. Okay, and Trump sent out $600 a week unemployment bonuses when Biden came into office, his unemployment bonuses were only $300 a week. Those have now stopped. Okay. So really the economy is starting to struggle now because of inflation and gas prices. Also, you can see here the White House is considering pausing the federal gas tax like multiple states have done. Well, both they've multiple states have paused their state gas taxes as a way to provide stimulus to their state residents. Basically every time they go to fill up gas, they're saving money on gas prices that are out of this world. And there's been over 10, 15-ish states now that have passed state stimulus checks, state tax rebates, and even more so considering or in the process of doing this as their state legislatures and their state governors call for spending part of their stimulus money from the last package. Remember, states got $350 billion from the last stimulus package that went to the states. So states are now that they got it this year, states are like, well, let's send out that money now that inflation's crazy and our people are struggling. Remember that around 64 to 66% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and or have no money saved or are in debt. So yeah, about 2/3 of Americans literally just have no money. And this statistics were really before inflation was at 8% plus. Yeah. So now states are saying, and remember that states and the federal government are now taking in record amounts of cash. Yeah, and just to give you an idea, all the states right now are bringing in so much money because unemployment is at a historic low right now. It's at 3.6%, which is near a 50-year low. It's at the 50-year low is 3.5%. So both all the states and the federal government, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says that the government is going to be able to pay down the national deficit by 1.5 to 1.7 trillion based on the projections of how much money the government is taking in because more people are paying taxes, because more people have gone back to work, etc. Same thing with states. Just to give you an idea, all states are taking in more money. This is part of the reason why states are lowering taxes, giving stimulus checks out, tax rebates, as well as states are doing child tax credits and lowering grocery taxes, lowering gas taxes, pausing gas taxes. We're pretty much covering all this on our channel. Just to give you an idea, California, the largest state in the nation, also considered one of the largest countries in the world. If they were a country, they'd be considered the fourth or fifth largest GDP in the world if they were a country. You can see here, how big is California's historic budget? Visualize. So they just came out with this here before the weekend. Well, California's budget for this year is going to be $300 billion. Their surplus, their extra money alone, has reached 97 billion, almost $100 billion extra. Yeah, now remember that California wants to send out extra stimulus checks this year alone as well. Remember that last year they sent out stimulus checks of $600 and per person and $1,100 if you had children. This year the current proposal is for $400 if you own a car, or $200 per person and $200 per child, but they haven't decided on what to do yet. I wouldn't be surprised if they up that either. We'll have to see though, because they've been bickering back and forth on what to do with that. We'll see. But to give you an idea of how large this total budget surplus is, Each one of these dollar signs represents $1 billion. And you can see here, this is $300 billion. It equals a $7,500 vacation for every person in California, or 6.2 million Tesla Model 3s, enough for everyone ages 25 to 34 in California. It's a lot of money. It's 3 times the estimated cost for high-speed rail in California and 1.2 times Texas's current 2-year budget they're spending in just 1 year. It's also 2 times the federal student loan debt for California students that they're spending in just 1 year. Yeah, so it's safe to say that states are taking in a historic amount of money, literally by the month. Also, the federal government is too. Here you can hear the federal government saying that, well, they want to pause the federal gas tax as well as one thing they're considering, as well as, well, you also seen that they're considering the gas rebate cards. Check this out. This is the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm.
So on that note, the White House said this week that President Biden could use the Defense Production Act to help solve the problem. Are you developing plans to use that in order to increase the domestic pipeline?
Let's just say the president is prepared to use all of his authorities to do what he can to increase supply. Supply, of course, just to set the stage on this, though, Dana, for everybody, of course, oil is traded on a global market. This issue of supply is hitting every country around the world. Every country is paying high prices for gas. If you were in Singapore, you'd be paying $9. Canada, it's over $6. Bottom line is we have to, all countries, increase supply in this moment because demand is also increasing, especially as countries like China will be coming out of COVID. So you've got an upward pressure on prices. So the president is doing everything he can within his power, including releasing 1 million barrels per day at the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We've got to replace the barrels of oil that Russia used to export around the world, and that now is not available because of the war.
But he's not doing everything that he can do. One option is to pause the national gas tax. Mm-hmm. That is something that the woman who sits in the governor's mansion that you were in previously, Gretchen Whitmer, is calling for. Why hasn't that happened yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the tools. First and foremost, we want to increase supply. We also want to take a look at consumer relief directly.
Right,
and
but
that is
18 cents per gallon.
18 cents?
That's a lot when you add it up. So why not do it now?
It is, and it's certainly one of the things the president is evaluating. I know this is what's been happening in many states as well. Honestly, the whole array of tools are still being pressed. He's used the biggest tool that he has, but he's obviously very concerned about this continued upward pressure on prices.
What's he waiting for on the gas tax?
Well, I mean, part of the challenge with the gas tax, of course, is that it funds the roads, and we just did a big infrastructure bill to help fund the roads. So if we remove the gas tax, that takes away the funding that was just passed by Congress to be able to do that. So, that's one of the challenges, but I'm not saying that that's off the table. That is, as prices continue to rise, that's certainly something the administration is considering, just like I know governors across the country are considering that.
And here is Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on inflation and the federal gas tax as well. Check this out.
We're joined now by the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen. Madam Secretary, thanks for joining us this morning. The Wall Street Journal reported this morning that 44% of economists expect a recession in the next year. Is that what you expect as well?
Well, I expect the economy to slow. It's been growing at a very rapid rate as the labor market has recovered and we have reached full employment. It's natural now that we expect a transition to steady and stable growth. But I don't think a recession is at all inevitable. Chair Powell, clearly inflation is unacceptably high. It's President Biden's top priority to bring it down. And Chair Powell has said that his goal is to bring inflation down while maintaining a strong labor market. That's going to take skill and luck, but I believe it's possible. I don't think a recession is inevitable.
You say it's not inevitable. I guess the question is it likely? We're already seeing consumers start to pull back on services, especially some signs that the job market may be slowing as well.
Well, I think consumer spending remains very strong. There's month-to-month volatility, but overall spending is strong, although patterns of spending are changing, and higher food and energy prices are certainly affecting consumers and making them change their patterns of spending. But bank balances are high. It's clear that most consumers, even lower income households, continue to have buffer stocks of savings that will enable them to maintain spending. So I don't see a drop off in consumer spending is a likely cause of a recession in the months ahead. And the labor market is very strong, arguably the strongest of the post-war period. Not only is the unemployment rate near historic lows, but there are 2 job vacancies for in every unemployed worker. So the labor market remains extremely strong. Unemployment insurance claims near their lowest levels in history.
It turns out that you and the president, maybe even the Fed, were too optimistic about inflation last year. Concerned that may be happening again with your suggestion that a recession is not inevitable?
Well, inflation is really unacceptably high. Part of the reason is Russia's war on Ukraine, his boosted energy and food prices in the United States and globally. It's important to recognize that the United States is certainly not the only advanced economy suffering from high inflation. We see it in UK, we see it in France, Germany, Italy, and the causes of it are global, not local. Supply chain snarls, partly resulting from lockdowns in China, are also boosting inflation. And so these factors are unlikely to diminish immediately, but over time, I certainly expect inflation to come down. And I think it's possible to have that happen in the context of a strong labor market maintaining.
Well, you expect it to come down, but prices are going to go up before they go down, right? Again, most economists expect the inflation rate to move up to around 7% by the end of the year. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, we've had high inflation in the first half of this year, and that locks in high inflation really for the entire year. But I do expect in the months ahead that the pace of inflation is likely to come down, although remember there are so many uncertainties relating to global developments, and we're united with our allies in certainly wanting to take the steps necessary to address, to punish Russia for what it's doing in Ukraine, and there is some spillovers to us as well.
You say that inflation is a global problem, and it certainly is, but how do you explain the fact that Europe's core inflation last month was under 4% and the United States was at 6%? So,
energy prices spillover is really half of inflation, food and energy, and there is spillovers because energy is an important input into almost everything in the economy. It is true that we've had core inflation over and above that is too high, and the Fed will take steps to bring it down. And President Biden believes there are other things the administration can do to support what the Fed will do. He's had historic releases of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that, even though gas prices are high, they would be higher without those releases. He stands ready to work and is encouraging producers of oil and refined products, gas, to work with him to increase supplies to bring gas prices, energy prices down. And if Congress will work with him to enact some of the administration's programs, we can bring down other costs that are burdening households, like prescription drugs, health care costs, increase the supply of affordable housing. We clearly have a housing problem in the United States, and we need to address it by building more affordable housing.
The American Petroleum Institute is pushing back on the president's call for refiners to increase production. I want to share what their president, Mike Summers, said on Wednesday. Said the administration's misguided policy agenda shifting away from domestic oil and natural gas has compounded inflationary pressures, added headwinds to companies' daily efforts to meet growing energy needs while reducing emissions. How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't think that policies are responsible for what's happening in the oil market. Actually, consumption of gas and fuels are currently at lower levels than pre-pandemic. And what's happened is that production has gone down. Refinery capacity has declined in the United States, and oil production has declined. I think that producers were partly caught unaware by the strength of the recovery in the economy and weren't ready to meet the needs of the economy. High prices should induce them to increase supplies over time. And look, it's a medium-term matter. The way in which we can assure reasonable energy expenses for households is to move to renewables to address climate change as a medium-term matter. That's the way to free us from geopolitical movements in oil prices.
How about the short term? Several in Congress are calling for a gas tax holiday as prices average around $5 a gallon. Is that on the table?
Well, look, President Biden wants to do anything he possibly can to help consumers. Gas prices have risen a great deal, and it's clearly burdening households. So he stands ready to work with Congress, and that's an idea that's certainly worth considering.
How about lifting, this is separate from gas prices, but for broader consumer spending, how about lifting the tariffs on Chinese imports?
Well, President Biden is reviewing tariff policy toward China. He inherited a set of tariffs from the Trump administration, many of which were put on as retaliation for China's failure to respond to abuses that were uncovered in a 301 investigation. We all recognize that China engages in a range of unfair trade practices that it's important to address. But the tariffs we inherited, some serves no strategic purpose and raise costs to consumers. And so reconfiguring some of those tariffs so they make more sense and reduce unnecessary burdens is something that's under consideration and could,
So we should
could
expect
help
that soon?
marginally on inflation. It's under consideration. I don't want to get ahead of where the policy process is.
Secretary Yellen, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Yeah, so let me know your thoughts here in the comments. We'll be talking about this more here in our next video. So make sure to subscribe down below to our YouTube channel. It's completely free to do so. After you click the subscribe button, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you get notifications when we go live here with new videos, which is every day at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will keep you up to date here with everything. You can click here to watch my newest video next. And you can click here to see my newest video on Social Security raises of $2,400. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video.